restriction properly. We have no legal restriction on oil and gas exploration and exploitation in South Africa. The biggest challenge is foreign-funded NGOs that take us to court on every gas and oil project. That is what we should overcome. That's why in the pipeline today, we say we must have a legal system that deals with those disputes in an accelerated pace, as Namibia did. And if we do that, we are having to have a breakthrough, and we're going to deal with those disputes at a speed that is necessary to resolve them.
South Africa has joined the race to expand exploration of oil and gas deposits inland and along the coastline. The country has a long history of mining, but are newcomers to the oil industry.
Just looking at the south, the west, and the east, PASA estimate that we're probably sitting with, a good 270 billion barrels. When we look inland, we've got coal bed methane gas. We've got the Karoo, the estimate of 200 TCF. That's a big number, and that's a big opportunity.
Operationalization of a commercial viable national petroleum company will undoubtedly be a game changer, not only for South Africa, but for the African continent. It's a very important continent, heavily endowed, poor by accident. And our duty is to convert that endowment into wealth for Africans.
For decades, South Africa has been known for its minerals, gold, platinum, rare earths, resources that help shape global industry. But oil? That was never part of the equation. Until now. In recent months, a discovery beneath South Africa's territorial waters has quietly triggered alarm bells in global capitals. Early estimates suggest reserves large enough to redraw energy routes, reshape trade alliances, and shift political leverage, not just in Africa, but across the world. And suddenly, the world's most powerful economies are paying very close attention. Western governments, multinational energy firms, and foreign diplomats are moving quickly, some openly, others behind closed doors, all with the same objective: secure access before the balance of power changes. But this isn't just another oil discovery. South Africa sits at the crossroads of global shipping lanes, BRICS influence, and emerging African energy independence. Control here doesn't just mean fuel, it means leverage. Over pricing, over alliances, over who sets the rules in the next energy era. Critics say the rush exposes a familiar pattern: resource competition framed as partnership, urgency disguised as cooperation. Supporters argue investment is necessary for development. Meanwhile, South Africa faces a defining choice: how to manage this discovery without repeating the mistakes that have haunted resource-rich nations before it. Will the country use this moment to strengthen sovereignty and regional influence? Or will global pressure once again dictate the terms? Tonight, we examine how this oil discovery emerged, why global powers are circling, and what this unfolding energy battle means, not just for South Africa, but for the future of global power itself. This is not just about oil. This is about who controls the next chapter of the global energy story. South Africa's energy landscape is undergoing a transformation few predicted. Long regarded as a mineral powerhouse rather than an oil producer, the country now finds itself at the center of a rapidly evolving global conversation following the confirmation of significant offshore oil reserves. While exploration is still ongoing, preliminary assessments indicate volumes substantial enough to alter South Africa's economic outlook and draw intense international interest. The discovery comes at a moment of profound uncertainty in global energy markets. Supply disruptions, geopolitical tensions, and the accelerating transition away from fossil fuels have made new oil discoveries both valuable and controversial. In this context, South Africa's reserves represent more than potential revenue. They represent strategic leverage. Energy companies from Europe, North America, and Asia have reportedly expressed interest in participating in exploration and development. Governments, too, have begun engaging diplomatically, emphasizing partnerships, technical support, and investment frameworks. Official statements frame these approaches as mutually beneficial cooperation, Yet analysts note a familiar urgency underlying the outreach. South Africa's geographic position amplifies the stakes. Situated along critical maritime routes connecting the Atlantic and Indian Oceans, the country occupies a strategic location in global trade. An oil industry anchored here would not only serve domestic needs but potentially supply multiple regions, reducing dependence on traditional producers in the Middle East and elsewhere. For Western economies facing energy insecurity, diversification is essential. European states in particular are seeking alternatives as long-standing supply relationships face strain. South Africa's stability, infrastructure, and regulatory institutions make it an attractive prospect, especially compared to more volatile oil-producing regions. However, the government in Pretoria has signaled caution. Officials emphasize that any development must align with national priorities, environmental safeguards, and long-term economic planning. South Africa has experienced the complexities of resource governance before, and policymakers are keenly aware of the risks associated with rapid extraction driven by external demand. Public debate within the country reflects this tension. Some see the discovery as a long-awaited opportunity to stimulate growth, reduce unemployment, and fund public services. Others warn of environmental risks, inequality, and the danger of becoming locked into fossil fuel dependence at a time when the world is moving toward cleaner energy. International observers also note the broader geopolitical implications. South Africa is a key member of BRICS and maintains strong relationships with both Western and non-Western powers. How it chooses to structure partnerships, whether favoring multinational corporations, state-owned enterprises, or regional alliances, will signal its strategic direction. History offers cautionary lessons. Across Africa and beyond, oil discoveries have often brought as many challenges as benefits. Mismanagement, corruption, and external interference have undermined potential gains in numerous countries. South Africa's institutional strength may help mitigate these risks, but success is not guaranteed. Environmental groups have raised concerns about offshore drilling's impact on marine ecosystems. Legal challenges and regulatory reviews are expected, adding complexity to any development timeline. At the same time, global investors are weighing the reputational risks of fossil fuel projects amid climate commitments. Yet the reality remains. Oil continues to power much of the global economy. Demand may plateau in coming decades, but in the near term, new supply sources remain highly sought after. This reality explains the speed and intensity of international interest in South Africa's discovery. For South Africa, the challenge is balancing opportunity with sovereignty. Decisions made now will shape economic trajectories for generations. Whether the country emerges as a confident energy player or becomes entangled in external competition depends on governance, transparency, and strategic restraint. As negotiations continue and exploration advances, one fact is clear. South Africa's oil discovery has already changed the conversation. Global powers are watching closely, markets are recalculating, and the country stands at a pivotal moment in its modern history, one where resource wealth could either reinforce independence or invite new forms of pressure. The outcome remains uncertain. But what is unfolding is not merely an energy story. It is a test of power, choice, and control in a world where resources still shape destiny. South Africa is once again at the center of a global scramble that could reshape power, money, and influence for decades to come. Beneath its coastline and offshore basins, geological surveys have revealed what could be some of the most significant untapped oil and gas reserves discovered in recent African history. While the full scale is still being assessed, early estimates suggest resources large enough to alter South Africa's economic trajectory and, more importantly, redraw global energy alliances at a moment when the world is desperate for new supply. This discovery arrives at a critical time. Europe is struggling to replace disrupted energy flows, the United States is recalibrating its global influence, and emerging powers are racing to secure long-term access to critical resources. South Africa, long viewed primarily through the lens of minerals and manufacturing, now finds itself holding an energy card that many powerful nations urgently want to play. International oil companies, Western governments, Asian state-backed firms, and regional partners have all begun quiet but intense diplomatic engagement. Publicly, the language is about cooperation, investment, and development. Privately, officials acknowledge that this is a high-stakes contest for control, contracts, and strategic advantage. Energy security has become national security, and South Africa's offshore reserves have turned into a geopolitical prize. For South Africa, the discovery offers enormous promise but also enormous risk. The country faces high unemployment, chronic energy shortages, and sluggish growth. New oil revenues could finance infrastructure, stabilize public finances, and reduce dependence on coal-fired power. Yet history offers many warnings. Across the world, resource wealth has often brought corruption, inequality, and foreign interference rather than prosperity. The government insists it has learned from those lessons. Officials say South Africa intends to control the pace of development, prioritize domestic energy needs, and ensure that any foreign participation delivers clear benefits for local industry and workers. New regulatory frameworks are being discussed, including stricter local content rules, environmental safeguards, and state participation in key projects. Western governments, particularly in Europe, are watching closely. Since the disruption of traditional energy routes, European economies have faced volatile prices, industrial slowdown, and political pressure at home. Securing stable, long-term oil and gas supply has become an urgent priority. South Africa's reserves, located in relatively secure waters and governed by an established legal system, are seen as especially attractive. The United States views the situation through a different but equally strategic lens. Washington is less dependent on imported energy but deeply invested in maintaining influence over global supply chains. Access, partnerships, and alignment matter. American firms are keen to participate, but so is the U.S. government, which sees energy cooperation as a way to reinforce broader political ties with Pretoria at a time when South Africa has pursued a more independent foreign policy. China, meanwhile, has moved quickly and quietly. Chinese energy companies already have a strong presence across Africa, often backed by long-term financing and infrastructure deals. Analysts say Beijing is positioning itself as a patient partner, offering investment without political conditions, a message that resonates with many African governments wary of Western pressure. Russia's interest is also notable. Although constrained by sanctions, Russian energy expertise and diplomatic outreach remain active. Moscow sees African energy partnerships as a way to diversify alliances and counter Western dominance in global markets. South Africa is attempting to balance all these interests while maintaining sovereignty. Officials have repeatedly stated that the country will not be rushed into unfavorable agreements. Behind closed doors, negotiators are reportedly insisting on technology transfer, skills development, and downstream processing as conditions for access. Environmental concerns are adding another layer of complexity. South Africa has committed to reducing emissions and transitioning to cleaner energy. Civil society groups argue that large-scale oil development risks locking the country into fossil fuel dependence just as the world is moving away from it. Government leaders counter that energy transition requires capital, and that oil revenues could fund renewable investment if managed responsibly. Public opinion is divided. For many South Africans struggling with unemployment and rising costs, the discovery represents hope. Others fear that foreign corporations and political elites will benefit most, leaving ordinary citizens with little to show. Protests, legal challenges, and public consultations are already shaping the debate. Globally, the implications extend far beyond South Africa's borders. If developed rapidly, the new supply could ease pressure on global markets, influence oil prices, and weaken the leverage of existing exporters. That possibility explains the intensity of international interest and the unusually direct involvement of governments rather than just corporations. Western capitals are particularly sensitive to the optics. Any perception of pressuring South Africa could backfire, reinforcing narratives of exploitation. At the same time, failure to secure access could leave Europe and its allies more exposed in an increasingly fragmented energy world. For South Africa, the challenge is not just technical or economic, but political. The country must navigate between competing powers without becoming dependent on any single one. It must protect its environment while meeting urgent development needs. And it must ensure transparency in a sector notorious for secrecy. The coming months will be decisive. Exploration results will refine estimates. Policy decisions will clarify the rules of engagement. And diplomatic maneuvering will intensify, even if much of it remains out of public view. What is clear is that South Africa's new oil reserves have already changed the conversation. They have shifted attention, recalculated alliances, and reminded the world that Africa is not merely a passive supplier of resources, but an active player capable of shaping global outcomes. Whether this moment becomes a turning point for national prosperity or another cautionary tale will depend on choices made now, under intense international scrutiny. The world is watching closely, because the stakes are no longer just about energy. They are about power, influence, and who gets to write the rules of the next global order.